Welcome to the Highly Sensitive Podcast. I'm Lauren LaSalle, and I'm a former therapist. I'm a highly sensitive person and a self-care and empowerment coach for highly sensitive people. My goal for this podcast is to create a feeling of community, to be a supportive place for HSPs, and to normalize our experiences as highly sensitive people. Because I'm pretty sure we've all spent way too much time feeling like we're weird or don't fit in. Well, guess what? Here, you fit in perfectly. This podcast will give you tools to better understand yourself, to help you learn how to care for yourself as an HSP, and to start viewing your sensitivity as a strength. Thank you so much for joining me, and let's begin. Hello, and welcome to the Highly Sensitive Podcast. I, about 4 minutes ago, just got off of the August Zoom meeting for our HSP community. And I am not kidding when I tell you every month I so look forward to these meetings, and I don't really super enjoy hanging out with people for the most part, but this is one social event that I really look forward to it every month. It's been so much fun, and it's been growing as the summer progresses, which has been awesome too. We've been having new people joining the community and come to the Zoom meetings. So it's been really great. We talk about things that I certainly don't talk about with other people. And it's just a great place where you can connect with other HSPs who really get you. Even if you're just meeting, like we all can resonate with what we're sharing about our lives, about ourselves, about things we've been through. And so if this is something that you would also like to join in on, I would love to have you there. I will put the links to join the Zoom meetings in the episode description and links to download the Reclaim app, which is where the group, like the main group, lives. So I'll put those links in the episode description. It's really been so much fun. Like I said, I just really enjoy it. And it was a really great meeting, and I am just always in such a good mood afterwards. So it's a good time. So I don't think I have any announcements to make. Before I get into the episode guest, I did just finally get over having bronchitis for like 3 weeks, and my 2-year-old daughter also had it, which is horrible. We still have this lingering chest congestion and cough. I don't know if you can hear it in my voice that I still have a bit of a sore throat, but this past week we finally are feeling mostly like ourselves again. It's been a long journey, but here we are. So I'm very happy that I can actually record this intro, even if I'm getting it out later in the day than I was planning on, but here we are. So I'm very excited to announce that my guest today is another male HSP, and his name is Andy Nelson. So Andy Nelson grew up in a classic HSP scenario, knowing he was different, but not understanding why or how. It involved shame, low to no self-esteem or self-confidence, and a constant yearning to understand himself. Until he graduated from college, he had no real identity to cling to until he got into business with his brother. It gave him confidence and an identity, and around the same time he learned from his therapist what HSP SPS means. It changed his view of himself for the better, and he's been working hard to spread understanding and awareness of the existence of HSPs everywhere. Andy shared so many great things in our conversation. He talked about being able to embrace who he is and things that helped him get there. He talked about how finding his passion helped him gain confidence. He talks about his experience as a man being highly sensitive. And we talk about being a highly sensitive parent and some difficult feelings that come up along with the great feelings of being a parent and sort of how to navigate that. Here is my conversation with Andy. What was your experience like discovering that you're highly sensitive?
Well, it was a bit of a life's journey, if you think about it that way. The first time I realized it or had been told about the idea was through a therapist of mine. And there were, before she talked to me about the idea of SPS or HSP, there was something that she said. I was just kind of telling her about my life and growing up and circumstances at home, etc. And she said, "Well, gosh, Andy, it sounds like you had kind of a traumatic childhood." And hearing someone in her position, like professionally, this is what she does. She talks to people and hears these stories, and it kind of blew my mind. It's like, what, really? Is that? I never thought of it that way. And I only mention that because, in the spirit of her being able to open my eyes to certain things that I had not previously considered or even really known about, it was just a really kind of a life-changing thing. And so one of those things that she opened my eyes to was the idea of a highly sensitive person, or the sensory processing sensitivity trait. And it was just in a therapy session where she told me about this, and she's like, "I think you are, like, you show all the characteristics of it, and it seems pretty obvious from what we've been talking about and everything." And for me, it was such a kind of a relief, a bit of a load off my shoulders, hearing. I mean, I don't know that you would consider that a diagnosis. I don't know that diagnosis is the appropriate word for something that's just a characteristic or a trait of one's personality. But hearing someone identify me that as such, it made so much sense. And the reason the reason it was such a relief to me was because I thought always before that I was just different in some weird way. And I use the word weird there in the bad connotation. And so it made me feel a lot less alone, for one, and also allowed me to immediately have a greater self-understanding, which is just such a big part of, for me, it's such a big part of my life. There was this weird hole that I didn't even consider that it was a blind spot in my self-understanding until she shone a light on it. And then it was just, wow, I didn't even know I was blind to this. So pretty amazing moment there.
Yeah, I love when therapists are aware of high sensitivity. That's just so amazing because I wish I had had a therapist that had told me, like, this is what it is. That would have
Yeah.
been so helpful instead of trying to just figure it out on my own. But I think it's also interesting that you bring up the word feeling weird because I feel like so many of us use that word to describe how we felt before we discovered that we're highly sensitive. So that's just really always been really interesting to me every time somebody brings that word up.
Yeah. I mean, to me, the word, I kind of qualified weird with a bad connotation in that context, because the word weird to me has always been one that people typically would associate with me in a bad way.
Hmm.
But as I got older, I tried to kind of embrace it and say, yeah, I am weird. Being normal is boring. Being normal sucks. There's nothing interesting about that. So I like my weirdness.
Hmm. How were you able to, or how did you get to the point where you are able to embrace who you are and being highly sensitive as a part of that?
Well, for me, I had this, I've had a long evolution in my self-confidence and self-esteem. So, and sort of my just identity as it relates to other people and how they see me. And so that all ties in together in that, growing up, I was very, very, very shy, had very low self-esteem, no self-confidence. I always put others on the pedestal and I was the one lower. Like, everyone knows better than me. They're doing things right and I'm for some reason doing things wrong. And it's just a constant kind of thing in the back of my head that I am sort of less than. And that was just kind of in my head. And while others could say, like, why don't you just, be confident, like, just do it, it's fun. And like, I get that intellectually, that'd be great if I could do that, but it's so hard to do. I'm not wired that way, for better or worse. And then as I grew up and got older, that that didn't change all that much until, really, I would say, a little bit after college. So the first sort of milestone that I consciously noticed in terms of the development of my own personal self-confidence and self-esteem was in 2009, or like I guess 2008. I had been reading about the Appalachian Trail and hearing a lot of people talk about it and how cool it was, and I just became kind of obsessed with this idea of hiking the Appalachian Trail, and I decided to do it on my own, just solo hike. And my sort of drive and motivation to do it became not all consuming, but it was like the driving sort of thing in my life. I had a job doing video editing, but it wasn't, I studied philosophy in college. It was just a job that I had, this video editing. And it wasn't like, I was on, in some big training to become something particular. It was a video editing job that I just got and was learning to do and never experienced it. Anyway, it wasn't this great passion of mine, though I liked it. And so anyway, the Appalachian Trail thing was the kind of the beacon of light for me in terms of something to move toward and like a piece of my identity that I could have some confidence around. In that, for example, if I would go out to a bar or wherever, just be in public, I had such a hard time talking to strangers, to people I didn't know. Even if they started talking to me first, I'd be a little hesitant. It was just like, it was awkward. And I'm like, it's weird even thinking about it now, how difficult it was for me. But then once I had this thing that I was motivated and passionate about, and that is going on this solo hike, it was something that people were genuinely intrigued to listen to me talk about. And it was about me. And finally having some piece of my identity that people were actually interested to hear me talk about was a game changer. And so I identified that as like, oh my God, I would actually be excited to go up to a stranger and tell them about this, and they'd probably be interested. And so that just fundamentally changed the way that I saw myself, and realizing that I have something that I can latch onto that's like a grounding force, something I can tether myself to as a part of my identity. And then, I did the hike. I didn't do the whole thing. I only got up to the Smoky Mountains, a lot shorter than I was hoping. I was actually hoping to do the first half of the trail, about 1,000 miles, and only got about 150. But anyway, most people who hear that are like, oh my God, 150-mile hike, that's insane. But
Yeah.
whatever. I had a big goal and was excited for it, and blah, blah, blah. Talk to me later about the details of why, but not that interesting. So anyway, that was a lot of fun. And I learned a lot about myself, and it was just a big kind of journey in my life. So I got back from that, and my brother and I had started a business. Kind of. We hadn't fully started it per se, but we had this idea, and that was a whiskey distillery where my great 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 grandfather had this distillery here in Middle Tennessee before Prohibition. It was huge. It was the biggest in the state of Tennessee. And we didn't really know anything about it growing up, but we eventually, a little bit after I graduated college, a year later, we discovered this history that we didn't really know about growing up, but it was this fascinating thing that we both really also latched on to in terms of something to do and move toward for our future. And so as we were sort of, we had no experience in business or anything. So it took us a while to get started, but finding the fundamentals and meeting all the right people, et cetera, et cetera. So that all came to us, and again, was part of our identity. And then as we actually got the business started and got up and running, I found things like, as an example, similar to my AT hike, I went to we had a 5-year high school reunion, and I went to my 5-year reunion, and the people who I was not friends with at all, I was, believe it or not very cool in high school. And there were people who, it's not like I disliked them, but it was just, those were the cool kids who I was terrified to talk to and thought they probably hated me or something like that. And then we get there and they hear about me doing this distillery thing, and it's making whiskey and have this brand out. And it's like, oh my God, they want to listen to me. This is unbelievable. Like, I have something sort of worthwhile to talk about, and something that people are interested in. And so long answer to that question, but did I even answer the question? Does that all make sense?
Well, it sounds like you were basically saying that once you had a goal of some sort and something that you're really passionate about, that really helped you feel more confident in who you were and sort of help you discover part of your identity and feel like you had something to offer, I think, to sum that up in a nutshell.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. It helped me understand and have something that I could be confident in about myself. And I just hadn't had that before.
hmm I can totally relate to that too. I mean, when you were talking about like how you were and how you felt growing up too, I was like, "Oh, hey, yep, is he talking about me or himself?" Because it sounds
Yeah.
just like how I felt, which I'm sure so many of us can relate to. And I was as you were talking too about finding a passion and having that give you confidence. I think I also sort of found the same thing when I decided to go to grad school to become a therapist. I was like, this is I didn't really have like a goal in life before that. I was sort of trying to figure out what I was doing, like what I was passionate about. And so then I found that, and that sort of like you were talking about gave me the confidence and something that I could talk to other people about that they found interesting. And since then I felt much more confident in who I am and my identity. And I think it really does help to know what you're passionate about, to have a goal that you're working toward. um, I mean, even just socially, like it gives you something to talk to people about if you maybe are feeling awkward otherwise. So I think I've also found that that's a huge piece to me to figuring out who I am and feeling more confident in that too. So yeah, I'm glad you
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up because I hadn't really thought about that until now, but I can definitely relate.
Yeah. And when I also think about other people in my life who I know that have not had that, I see there's one individual I'm thinking about in particular, a grown woman who never really had a career or kind of even a hobby that she latched onto or passion that she latched onto that is, and she's not in a great place right now. She's not, really depressed and it's just not a happy thing. And I think a lot of it can be attributed to that. She doesn't seem to have anything that she can call her own or herself. She
Mm.
seems, maybe a little rudderless or just this vague soul floating out there without something to be identified as.
hmm Yeah, I think whether you're highly sensitive or not, having something that gives you a real purpose and that you feel excited about every day is just it really helps in so many ways.
Yeah, I think the purpose, that's a big, I think that kind of encapsulated it's specifically that having that purpose.
Yeah. So as the second highly sensitive man to be on the podcast, could you share a little bit about just like specifically that experience? I mean, I know it's all you know, but I'm
Yeah.
sure I know you listen to the podcast. You've heard a lot of women talk about their experiences. So it'd be interesting to hear from you. What has that been like for you?
Yeah, it's been very interesting. So as you said, it is all I know, but one thing that I have noticed is I actually identify a lot with women in certain ways that a lot of men don't. And I know I don't mean that as, in terms of gender or sexual identity. I'm like as as white as I'm like white, straight, cis male. That's me. But there are things like I'll find myself like in college, I had a handful of like very good friends who were women, and and we just had like a great time. I was just like one of the girls, in some way. And I don't know what it was, but it's the same. It's part of the reason that I've pretty much only had female therapists. There's a certain kind of energy or vibe or understanding. I don't quite know how to articulate it, but like a similar wavelength to a female like mind or understanding that I can identify with a little more than your like typical male, certainly more than like an alpha male sort of understanding and outlook. And so I can say with confidence that that's the highly sensitive part of me coming through in so many ways. And like at I don't know, like when I like let's say we're my wife and I are at a friend's wedding or something like that, and we go out of town. And I mean, this happened a few times where we'll be out of town and like sharing a cabin or house with a bunch of people and couples and everything, and I end up kind of gravitating more towards like the girls will kind of all get together and the guys together, and I'm like, I can sit and hang with the guys and have a great time. But sometimes there's something that just compels me to like, I'm kind of like listening to the girls' conversation a little more, and I just feel I sometimes feel more comfortable in a group of women than I do in a group of men. And I think part of it may have to do with my maybe full lifetime of sort of sense of being less than. And what I what I mean by that, I guess that could sound pretty offensive to some people, but what I mean by that is like I think just typically in American culture anyway, the female sort of in air quotes role is to be sort of the support kind of role, and the man is like the one who goes out and is the breadwinner and is like the kind of alpha in the relationship, and or just in society generally. And so I get that and understand that, but I don't really necessarily fit into that sort of alpha role in so many ways. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, that's I don't know if that again, if that really answers your question, but
Yeah.
that to me are kind of those are some examples of why as a male it seems as a man it seems I don't know, it's also part of the reason I think that I always felt sort of different, because I'd see as a little kid I couldn't identify it or articulate it, but probably now looking back, one of the reasons I always felt different or weird was because I wasn't just like full on, oh, come on, you're one of the guys. Like, you know, it was, I was just kind of attuned to a different wavelength, I guess, than most of the guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, I know talking to other highly sensitive men too, they've also said that they feel generally more comfortable around women also. So I don't know if that's just like a general highly sensitive male thing or if it's just happens to be the guys that I'm talking to, but
Yeah, yeah.
I would
Oh,
guess maybe it is a lot of highly sensitive men just feel more comfortable around women.
yeah, I'd imagine so. Can you give me 1 second? I need to turn off this baby monitor. Hold on.
Oh yeah,
I don't know if you can hear it in the background.
I did a little bit, but that's okay. I don't it wasn't loud at all.
Uh,
I was just sort of
okay.
wondering like, am I hearing a baby or is that just my brain?
Oh yeah. Oh, that was babies. We have three human children. The Our oldest is 3. He's in like daycare or whatever, preschool, and then we have twins who are 10 months old right now. So they're
Wow.
at home napping and sometimes crying or kind of talking. So that was
Oh,
them.
yeah. Oh, I have a almost 2-year-old. So I can't imagine having three and two of them are babies.
It's a lot. It is a lot, but it's pretty great.
hmm Do you want to talk a little bit about being a parent and being highly sensitive? Because I know there are a lot of
Sure.
parents that listen and it can be quite overwhelming at times.
That's a pretty good word for it. But yeah, I'd love to talk about it. Any particular questions, or you want me to just blather on about it? Because
I
I'm happy
mean,
to do that too.
if you've got anything that you're ready to let out, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the things that kind of occurs to me primarily in this context of this conversation is I'll kind of describe to use the word journey again, even though it's so overused, I feel like, but
Mm.
in parenthood and just in life. So when we had our first, I no one knows what to expect when you have their first child, and you just kind of take it as it comes and you learn, and you can read all the books and talk to all the people, but you don't know until you experience it, And so when we had our first, he was actually very well behaved. Like as babies go, all three of ours have been very easy, and so I'm very grateful for that. And he started sleeping through the night at like 2 months, which is unbelievable. Like
Wow.
that's almost unheard of, and so that's been great. Um, but it also is like that's still it took a full 8 weeks of just like constant buzzing of nerves and anxiety and like I I don't know, fear, like anger, all these different things that come along with being humbled at every turn, and also being entirely devoid of sleep, which just rattles your brain in so many ways that you just don't know of until you experience it again. And so it's just all around a lot of chaos, both physically and emotionally, especially. And then we let's see, I don't remember who it was that introduced me to this idea, but it was a therapist, I think, someone who introduced my wife and I to the idea that having a child is, especially your first, is like it's a grieving process, the grieving process for your old life.
Mm.
Because I found myself experiencing what would be really resentment, and not toward the baby necessarily, but toward just the universe. That, God, I can't go hang out with my buddies. I can't go out to eat tonight. I can't go, to a bar and have a beer with a friend. I can't do all these things. And again, I knew it wasn't like towards the baby. I'm a human. I understand that they like this is what I signed up for. But it wasn't until I heard it framed as a grieving process that it took a lot of the weight off my shoulders again, because I've been through the grieving process before. I know that it happens. You kind of I like the phrase, you don't get over it, you get through it.
Mm.
Because you don't just get over it, it is still there for the rest of your life. The new situation, your old life is gone, and there's no getting it back. There just isn't. And also knowing that like we did this with our eyes wide open. We knew this again is what we signed up for. It's what we wanted. So we'll get through this. And yeah, it just took some time, but having the notion in my head that this was a grieving process helped me actively kind of resolve it and kind of resolve those emotions in my own head. It was just a really good lens with which to look at it that made sense to me in a way that had never occurred to me before. And so that also helped me get much more, sort of gain more patience in the whole process, and be able to embrace every feeding, every like get up in the middle of the night, like, okay, we're just going to do this several times tonight, and it's going to be really tough, but again, it's what we signed up for. Eventually, this will not have to happen anymore, and he'll be, you know, eating on his own, blah, blah, blah. So that was just a hugely helpful thing. Also, Prozac was it's a big thing. I didn't start taking that until after we had our twins, because having two, it's like, so this was the second pregnancy, which of course it was my wife carrying the children. So there's that I didn't have to experience. But, we didn't, or I didn't have that. The grieving process was not as severe or great as it was with our first, but it was also two children now instead of just one. So literally every single thing that we did, we had to do it twice, and get used to that again. And so that is to say, filling every bottle, my wife, doing breastfeeding or pumping or whatever it was, it's just so draining. But then having the patience to allow it to become a routine that you no longer resent or are pissed off about. It just takes time, but honestly, having Prozac in my system helped me a lot with that, just to calm it down and be able to live with it and know that this is life. Like, this is what I'm doing now,
Mm.
and accepting that. And by the way, I cannot believe that more people don't talk about how much time is spent doing dishes if you're a parent, and especially of twins. It's unbelievable.
I can't even imagine. I mean, there are three of us in our house right now, and I feel like I am just constantly doing dishes. My daughter will be having a snack at her little table, be like, "Mommy," and want me to sit next to her. I'm like, I'll be with you after I'm got to do these dishes. And it's like twice a day. I feel like I'm never
Yeah.
with her because I have to do the dishes. I'm like, what
God, I would
choice do you have?
love,
They have to get done.
I would love if the dishes were just twice a day.
That's it. I'm not having any more kids.
Hey, it's not for everyone, but
Well, I'm glad you brought up the grieving process too, because I'd also heard that. I think, I don't know how far into, after my daughter was born, but that really helped me to hear that as well, because I was feeling like this is everything I've always wanted. I've always wanted to be a mom, and now I am a mom, and this is like the best thing ever. And also, I can't undo this. And I have a bunch of things that I want to do that I can't do anymore. And maybe I should have done more of it before I had this baby. So it's just like so many opposite feelings. So, like you were saying, having that sort of label as like this is also a grieving process did help me feel better, because then I didn't feel like, oh, I'm an awful mom for feeling this way. Like it's normal. So
yeah,
that also helped me immensely too. And for anybody listening, if you are, just had your first kid, I hope hearing that helps as well.
yeah, yeah. It was a big thing for me.
Yeah, so I know something else that you wanted to talk about was building a community of HSPs. So is this something that you have done, or like you're working on connecting with other HS, something you want to do?
Well, I've just kind of ridden the coattails of those who have done something about it. So a therapist that I see has created something of that on her own, and that is to say there's a group. I do this group therapy thing. It's, once every couple weeks, but it's specifically an HSP an HSP therapy group, and
Wow.
there have been no more than 5 people in it at a time, with the therapist as kind of the moderator. But there's no, I mean, the only agenda is to kind of share experiences, talk about what's going on, help others kind of through their difficulties and things like that, with the kind of background lens of being, highly sensitive. And so, to me, the kind of camaraderie of that is something that I have not really felt in. It's a very specific style and type of camaraderie that I'd not felt before, because I'd never had a group of people who all had the experience of feeling like they were different and being weirdos for their whole life. I mean, I know a lot of artists, and so I know a lot of that, those people in that respect, insofar as artists and creative people can identify that with that. But those people don't all have this specific trait that is. It's just so fascinating to me that it's a thing, and the more I think about it big picture in terms of like an entire species, it really makes so much sense, to me. I'm going off on a tangent here, but also shout out to the idea of a yin and yang, like the idea of the duality. Like, if we had a whole world full of go-getters, then it'd be a whole different world if you didn't have the kind of thinkers and contemplators to balance that out. And so I
Mhm.
love that about it, and that's another thing that I love about the community, is kind of being able to, I mean, sometimes it's commiserating about just the world around us that isn't necessarily tailored for a nervous system like we have. or processing sort of operation that we have in our heads, but being able to identify with one another as like-minded or like feeling like experienced people is really, really satisfying and fulfilling.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's been a really big help. And then I've heard about other groups. Is it attached to maybe Elaine Aron's community that she's kind of garnered throughout this, where there are retreats out in Arizona and California and places that are the idea of just meeting a whole bunch of HSPs, and it seems like such an interesting opportunity and an experience that is, I don't know, this whole thing is like there's a bit of a magicness to it in
Mm-hmm.
my mind, because it's still relatively so new to me, and it's been probably, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years since I kind of was alerted to the idea of a highly sensitive person.
Mm. That's so cool that there's a therapy group. I mean, I've never heard of that before, and I think it's so needed. Or, I mean, not even necessarily therapy, but well, first of all, for therapists to know about it. And second of all, just for there to be more places for us to find each other. Because I know so many people have said, I would love to connect with other HSPs, but I have no idea how to do that, besides like Facebook groups and stuff that's a little more informal and
Yeah.
can have like thousands and thousands of people in them.
Right. And it's such a strange thing. Like, I don't use social media. I mean, I have LinkedIn technically, but that's it. And I don't, so anytime there's a Facebook, that to me is like, it's a very intriguing notion to get on Facebook and join those and sort of participate in that way. But I don't want Facebook for a whole lot of reasons beyond that. So I don't. And so I feel very fortunate to have come across this particular group and this particular therapist. And it, to me, I find it like having this group of people to be able to identify with, and then I don't know, how would I put it? I guess there's like this kind of virtuous cycle that I've found myself in, of the idea of self-confidence and self-understanding that play upon each other in such a positive way. Like, the more confident I have become in myself, the more I want to explore my own self and who I am and all that. And the more I get to understand myself, the more confidence I gain through that. And so it kind of piles on top of each other, the confidence and self-understanding, and it wouldn't be like this group and this community is able to facilitate that in such a way that it's kind of impossible to find it elsewhere.
Hmm. Yeah. That's so cool. I'm so glad to hear that you are a part of this. And I also just quickly want to plug, if you download my Reclaim app, I have an HSP community on there. So you can check that out if anybody would like to join that. It is really interesting to connect with other HSPs. I remember when we had our first Zoom meeting and we were just like, "Hi."
Yeah.
It's just like so exciting.
Yeah. I mean, it's, I've not, I don't know. I don't know how it would be. It's so strange because, like, it's also a thing that, well, for one, there's this not only inherent, but also explicit understanding of like, hey, this doesn't leave the room, keep things confidential. And so that having that understanding makes it a lot more comfortable and
Mhm.
lets people kind of be more free to express themselves. And so it kind of goes without saying, but the the other thing that comes to my mind would be like an AA meeting or something, and they're fundamentally different in so many ways. But the idea of having this specific community in which you have kind of free reign and trust among those in the room, and to like kind of let yourself be true and free. And sometimes it's really difficult to get to that point, but you just kind of have to keep going and gain that sense of community. Now, I have not been to an AA meeting. I'm fortunate that I don't kind of have that thing, that that bug, whatever people call it. But I'm in the alcohol business, and also have a family in the United States of America in 2024. So I know addicts and alcoholics, and I interface with that a good deal, and I'm very conscious of it. And so I've done a lot of kind of research around it, and it's also something I'm just very interested in generally, the sort of the concept of addiction. And it's just like, I don't know, it sounds weird to say I'm interested in it, but you know what I mean?
Mhm.
It's something kind of very close to me in certain ways. And it just is, I don't know, I'm drawn to it because of the stories, because of it's just a one aspect of human nature that I feel compelled to explore more. But anyway, that's all to say, for some reason that kind of came up in my mind of like almost a similar community, but I can't speak too much on that because I'm only part of one of those, and so I can't really compare it to the other.
Mhm. Well, is there anything else that you want to talk about that we haven't talked about yet? Any tips or words of wisdom that you'd like to share before we wrap up?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I've been more recently, I guess a couple things. One, I have a tough time reconciling kind of my own experience and understanding of being highly sensitive and the maybe public discourse about it. And this is maybe a little bit tempered by the fact that, again, I don't have social media, and so I may not know as much of the public discourse about it as others, but that's part of the reason exactly why I don't have social media, because I don't want to hear everybody's yapping on about it, because almost all of it's going to be negative.
Mm.
But it is interesting, like hearing the idea of it becoming more understood and accepted, sort of being a socially acceptable idea. So so I love that part about it. But at the same time, I'm very conscious of the, certainly there are individuals who it can be used as almost like a crutch or an excuse for certain things, and people can kind of take that identity and place it upon themselves, even if it's not genuine, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
And that kind of, I don't know if it scares me, but it really bothers me a great deal. And it's kind of like, I don't know, giving the wrong sort of identity to a particular group. And I don't know, I feel like people who are going to claim HSPs, I think generally are naturally very much more of like, maybe don't talk about it, be about it. You're not going to be real loudmouths. I mean, this is unbelievable. The group that we're in, it's so funny. We talk so much about, okay, well, anybody got anything else to say? And it's just silent. Everybody's silent for like 20 seconds. And you just get a group of 5 or 6 people in the general population in a room, and you will not have a 20-second silence. It's just people are uncomfortable with it. But I feel like
Mm.
all these sensitive people are so much more comfortable with it, and they're just going to live in it and sit in it and think about it. And so the idea that someone who may not be genuinely highly sensitive, but kind of can see that as I don't know how to, an example of someone using it as a crutch or an excuse, but I know that it happens, and that bothers me because then you know, I, I don't know, they're not representing the community in the right way all the time, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
And so I don't know where I'm going with that. It was just a comment that I've seen happen, a handful of times, and so it'll be what it'll be, but it's just kind of a strange thing. And then the other, also sort of under the umbrella of public discourse, like in the cultural dialogue, the term self-care being thrown out so much more now. I feel like, but I love that therapy is a more kind of understood and, again, socially acceptable thing, and something that people are not afraid to talk about publicly. That's all like so great. But again, then there are people who will kind of blabber on a little too much about, my therapist said this or that, or kind of speaking just in the sort of therapy terms, colloquially, just in their everyday. And it's like, what are you trying to, it's kind of like, thou doth protest too much. Like, you're
Mm.
talking a little too much about it. Is this real, or what's happening here? But the idea, again, another tangent here, but to me, really embracing self-care as a highly sensitive person has been hugely important to me, especially, I mean, honestly, just in the physical. I mean, the physical, like getting a massage is so helpful for me. Uh, it's a physical sort of act, but then I can feel it helping my emotional well-being and, other things, just other kind of body work. I've become not obsessed with, but I bought a massage gun, and being able to like just massage the bottom of my feet. It's unbelievable how good that feels. And I really encourage people to really take that up and be good to yourself, because sometimes you're all you've got, and you gotta take care of yourself. So that's been very helpful for me.
Hmm. Awesome. Well, how can people connect with you?
Ooh, good question. I mean, I don't have social media, and I don't know if, I don't know. I don't have, I left my job recently. And so that's been a lot of fun, but I don't have, I mean, I've got a personal email. Is that weird to throw out on here?
I mean, if you would like people to email you, if they feel compelled to do so, then, that's fine. If you don't want to share, that's also fine.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's going to be a pretty specific group of people. I don't feel uncomfortable giving anybody who's going to listen to this
That's true.
my email address. And
If
I
they've
guess I
made
could
it
just,
through the whole episode, I think
yeah.
they probably have the best intentions emailing you.
Yeah, yeah, you'll probably be okay by me. Yeah, so my email address is just wanelson@gmail.com. And yeah, I'm excited to hear from anybody if they so wish.
Thank you so much for listening to the Highly Sensitive Podcast. You can help support the podcast by taking a minute to rate and review it, share a favorite episode with a friend, or become a subscriber on Patreon at patreon.com/highlysensitivepodcast. Visit laurenlassalcoaching.com for free resources, information about my coaching programs, and to join my email list. You can connect with me on Instagram at selfcarewithlaurenlassalle or email me at lauren@laurenlassalcoaching.com.